Picture this, right? Your teenager is standing in the doorway of the living room. Their face is totally red, their fists are clenched, and they're just screaming that you have completely ruined their life.
Oh, wow, yeah. That is a terrifying image.
It really is. And they're threatening to walk out the front door and just, never come back. And in that exact moment, your heart is just hammering against your ribs. Your adrenaline is absolutely spiking.
Right.
And every biological instinct in your body is screaming at you to do one of two things, right? You either want to scream back even louder to, like, reassert your dominance.
Yeah, the classic fight response.
Exactly. Or you want to cave in completely just to make the terrifying confrontation stop. And if you were listening to this deep dive right now, chances are you felt that exact physiological spike.
Oh, absolutely. Most people have.
You know, that feeling of complete chaos. And you probably also know that whatever you instinctively do next is almost certainly going to fail.
It fails because, well, our biological imperatives, like the fight or flight response, they're entirely unsuited for complex human relationship dynamics, especially when we're dealing with someone who is actively resisting us.
Right. Because fight or flight is for, like, running from a bear.
Exactly. We are wired to neutralize immediate physical threats. We are not wired to instinctively navigate the murky, highly charged waters of emotional defiance.
And that is exactly our mission today. If you're joining us, I know exactly who you are. You're the learner. You're the kind of person who doesn't just want a list of surface-level tips on how to win an argument. You want to look under the hood.
You want the real mechanics of it.
Yeah, exactly. You want to understand the actual psychological machinery of why humans clash, why our instincts betray us, and, how we can systematically change the dynamic of any fraught relationship. So we are taking a profound deep dive today into a highly counterintuitive, deeply researched approach to conflict.
And it fundamentally flips everything we think we know about control and confrontation and authority.
It really does. So what are we looking at today?
We are drawing heavily today from the groundbreaking work of Haim Omer and Yoel Everett. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 3 of their text, When the Child Resists, and their frameworks surrounding what they call persistent vigilant care.
Persistent vigilant care.
Yes. And, it's a method developed primarily for parents dealing with fiercely resistant children and teenagers. But I want to be clear, the psychology underpinning it is universal.
Right, because human nature is human nature.
Exactly. It dissects the power struggles, the paralyzing helplessness, and those vicious cycles of escalation that can happen honestly between spouses, siblings, or even coworkers.
It's incredibly rich material. So let's start by analyzing the trap we all fall into.
Yeah.
Why do our natural instincts for dealing with resistance almost always backfire?
Well, it starts with a misunderstanding of how change actually happens.
Right. Like, when you catch someone you love, let's say a child, doing something dangerous or harmful or deceptive, the immediate instinct is to, like, amass all your evidence, confront them severely, and deliver this massive ultimatum.
Yes. We expect that a massive show of force will act as a silver bullet. And that's what the research identifies as the illusion of immediate change.
The illusion of immediate change. I love that phrasing.
It's so accurate, right? When a person in authority discovers a transgression, they are often fueled by pure panic. They confront, they threaten, they punish, and they frequently just completely lose their temper.
Because they're scared.
Exactly, they're terrified. But beneath all that noise is this desperate hope. They think, if I'm just severe enough, if I yell loud enough, the other person will be so daunted that they will immediately drop their problematic behavior.
It's like we all expect this cinematic moment,
Oh, for sure, the movie moment.
Yeah, you give the big booming speech, the music swells, the teenager hangs their head in shame, realizes the error of their ways, and promises never to do it again.
Which is, as we know, a complete fantasy. Deeply ingrained negative behavioral patterns simply do not end in one stroke. But because the parent is operating under this illusion of immediate change, they hyper-focus on the child's immediate reaction in that exact minute.
They're waiting for submission.
Right. They need to see the kid cave.
And what actually happens in reality? The teenager rolls their eyes, or they yell back, or they tell you they hate you and wish they were never born.
And that failure to secure immediate submission is what springs the trap. The parent feels completely undermined. They feel obliged to enact dire threats just to save face.
Right, the classic, you're grounded for a year.
I'm taking your phone forever, or, I'm cutting off your tuition. But then we look at the foundational behavioral studies like the 1984 research by Patterson, Dishon, and Bank on Family Interaction and Deviancy.
What do they find?
This study maps out exactly what happens next. When you issue these massive, unenforceable ultimatums, the child essentially just calls your bluff.
Because, I mean, let's be real. No one can realistically ground a teenager for a year. It's logistically impossible.
Precisely. The parent eventually finds it exhausting or literally impossible to enforce the massive threat, so they give up or they quietly let the punishment slide.
And the kid notices that.
Oh, they absolutely notice, and the child realizes something incredibly potent. They realize they just have to outlast the storm. They serve their brief, loud time, and then revert entirely back to the disruptive behavior.
Wow. Let's think about the mechanics of that environment for a second. Because the attempt to force that immediate change just resulted in the kid screaming back and the parent issuing an empty threat. You end up with this continuous cycle of extreme escalation.
Yes, an escalation cycle.
I keep thinking about what it's like living next to a busy train track.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like the first week you move into the apartment, the noise of the train rattling the windows keeps you up all night. It's deafening. But after 6 months...
You don't even register it.
Exactly. Your brain habituates to the baseline level of chaos. You block out the usual volume. The only time you actually notice the train is if it blasts its horn continuously right outside your window.
That phenomenon of habituation is exactly what Patterson and his colleagues observed in these highly conflictual families. The family literally habituates to a noisy, hostile environment.
So screaming just becomes the new normal.
Exactly. They disregard the quote-unquote usual level of screaming and cursing. It becomes background noise. So to get anyone's attention, the hostility has to hit a terrifying new peak.
Which means everyone is just walking around with their nervous systems completely fried, waiting for the next massive explosion.
And humans cannot sustain that level of physiological arousal indefinitely. You just can't. So to avoid the constant warfare, parents eventually engage in a tactic called buying quiet.
Buying quiet, that phrase, wow. It hits hard. It implies a transaction, but a deeply unhealthy one. What does buying quiet actually look like day to day?
It looks like retreat. The parents keep the child at a safe distance. They leave them alone in their room for hours on end.
Because they're just exhausted.
Completely. The mere thought of initiating a new confrontation causes such deep dread that the parents just look the other way. They buy temporary peace by sacrificing their presence and their authority.
So they just let the kid do whatever.
Basically, yes. And gradually, they develop a highly negative, almost adversarial view of their own child. They feel like utter failures. The house divides into separate worlds, governed by opposite laws, coexisting in a state of Cold War.
It's a total systemic collapse. And you can see how it ruins marriages, too. The strict parent blames the lenient one for giving in. The lenient parent blames the strict one for being too harsh and alienating the kid.
Yes, the relationship between the parents completely fractures.
And it all stems from that initial illusion that a loud confrontation would fix everything immediately.
Which brings us to perhaps the most profound psychological mechanism keeping parents trapped in this cycle. It's not just stubbornness, you know. It is a demonstrable psychological phenomenon based on Gilligan's 1987 work on therapeutic trances.
Okay, yes.
It is called the Symptom Trance.
I found this concept completely fascinating when I was reviewing the source material. Walk me through the mechanics of a symptom trance. How does a parent get hypnotized by their kid's bad behavior?
Well, think about the conversations these parents have. What do they talk about over dinner? What do they obsess over while driving to work? What keeps them awake at 3 a.m.?
It's always the kid.
Always. The discourse narrows obsessively and exclusively to the child's problematic acts. It's an endless looping repetition. He doesn't give a damn about us. She vanishes every night. He steals. She lies.
Their entire reality shrinks down to the misbehavior. There's literally no other topic of conversation.
Exactly. Their focus narrows so drastically that it actually mirrors the cognitive state of a hypnotic trance. The parents are essentially bewitched by the child's act.
Bewitched. Wow.
They are unable to break the spell and regain any sense of initiative. Their attention is entirely captured by the hypnotist, which in this scenario is the child's deviance.
Hold on, though. Let me step into the shoes of the listener who might be dealing with this right now.
Sure.
If my kid is sneaking out at 2 a.m. or getting involved in really dangerous behavior, my obsession with that behavior feels like my parental duty.
Right, it feels responsible.
Exactly. You're telling me this obsession is a trance. But if I stop focusing on the sneaking out, aren't I just being dangerously negligent? Like, how can you fix a massive problem if you don't obsessively focus on it?
That logical leap is exactly what locks the trance in place.
Oh, really?
Yes, it feels incredibly responsible to focus on the problem, but negligence is ignoring the behavior entirely. The trance is the false belief that your obsession and your anger will control the behavior. There is a massive distinction there.
Wait, say that again? The trance is the belief that my anger controls them.
Yes. When you are fixated entirely on the child's actions, you are fighting a destructive battle for control over something you absolutely do not own, another human being's choices.
Because you literally cannot force another person's will, no
Yeah.
matter how much you yell.
You cannot. As long as the parent operates under the core belief, I must control my child and make them stop, they will inevitably fail and they will continually feel powerless.
So they're just banging their head against a brick wall.
Over and over again, the only way to break a symptom trance, to snap out of that hypnotic state, is a radical shift in the target of your control. You have to deeply internalize that you cannot control the child. You can only control yourself.
So it's shifting the internal monologue from, I'm going to make you stop doing X, to I'm going to control how I respond to X.
That is the absolute essence of it. When the parent keeps their own parental duty in mind, their duty to be present, to monitor, to stand firm, rather than the impossible goal of forcing immediate behavioral change, they free themselves from that learned helplessness.
Okay, but practically speaking, what does that shift actually look like? Because if trying to forcefully control the kid is a trap that leads to screaming matches, and doing nothing is negligence, how does a parent actually reassert their presence?
It's a very fine line to walk.
Right. Do you just stand there calmly while they tear the house apart? How do you reassert authority without starting World War III?
This is where we move into the actual mechanics of managing confrontations through persistent vigilant care. And the primary metaphor here is becoming an anchor.
An anchor.
Okay. This is not about passivity. It is about a profoundly active, undeniable presence. The text provides highly specific, almost clinical scripts for reframing these interactions to break the trance.
Let's dissect some of these scripts, because the subtle shift in language changes the entire power dynamic. Let's take the classic example of jealous siblings.
Very common scenario.
Right. One kid is constantly attacking or humiliating their sibling out of jealousy. The old trance-based way of handling this is screaming, "Stop hating your brother. Why can't you just be nice?"
Which is an attempt to control the child's internal feelings.
Exactly.
It is an impossible demand. You cannot dictate someone's emotions. You can't command someone to feel nice.
No, you really can't.
So, to break the trance, the vigilant care approach shifts the focus entirely to the parent's duty. The parent states clearly, we cannot dictate your feelings toward your brother. However, we'll resist any acts of violence or humiliation against him.
Okay, let's look at the architecture of that sentence. We cannot dictate your feelings. Right out of the gate, you are relinquishing the illusion of control.
Yes, you disarm them immediately.
You are disarming their defense. You aren't telling them how to feel. But then you say, however, we will resist acts of violence. You are stating your unshakable position. You aren't demanding they change. You are stating what you will do.
Exactly. Let's examine another common scenario. A teenager chronically skipping school. The traditional escalating approach is an ultimatum. You are going to school and you are going to get your grades up or else.
But again, you can't physically force a teenager to learn. You can physically drag them to a building, sure. But if they sit in a classroom and refuse to open a book, you have no leverage.
And they know that. They absolutely know you have no leverage. So the vigilant care script shifts to something completely different. You say, we cannot force you to be a good student. But it is our duty to check whether you skip classes, whether you take your school material with you, and whether you do your homework. From now on, we'll be in daily contact with your teacher about those matters.
Wow. It's brilliant because it takes the fight entirely out of it. There is nothing for the teenager to push back against.
You aren't arguing about their motivation or their future.
No. You are simply calmly stating the reality of your incoming surveillance. And here's one more that I think every single listener with a teenager or even a preteen will recognize. Extreme computer or phone overuse late at night.
A major, major battleground in homes today.
The vigilant care approach here is, we don't agree to you sitting at the computer late at night. After what happened last week, we want to know what is going on. We'll make visits to your room and check up on you more closely.
It is a statement of intent, not a demand for immediate compliance.
But I want to pause here. Because while these scripts sound beautifully logical in a vacuum, executing them in real time introduces a massive psychological hurdle.
The paradox of self-control.
Yes. It feels profoundly unnatural, almost cowardly, to a parent to not fight back when provoked.
Oh, absolutely.
If I calmly say, I'm going to check on your room tonight, and my teenager gets up in my face, uses profanity, and mocks me,
Hmm.
doesn't staying calm make me look incredibly weak? Doesn't it look like I'm just letting them walk all over me?
That fear of appearing weak is the ego talking, and it is the single biggest barrier to implementing this approach. The expectation that a parent should maintain absolute composure when their own child viciously provokes them. It seems preposterous to many.
It feels like you're losing.
Right. They feel an overwhelming, visceral obligation to win the confrontation. They believe that if they don't yell back, if they don't dominate the room physically and verbally, they are losers in the power struggle.
They feel like they have to show the kid who is boss.
But the research argues the exact opposite. True parental strength, true authority is reflected in the ability to persist in one's parental goals without being dragged into shows of force. When a parent believes they have to scream to prove they are in charge, they are actually broadcasting their own lack of self-assurance.
Wow. So yelling shows you're insecure.
Exactly. They are showing that they feel threatened.
They're showing that they can be easily manipulated, which raises a fascinating question, actually. Why does the child escalate the provocation in the first place?
That's the real question.
Right. When a parent tries this new, calm, vigilant care approach, the child rarely just accepts it. They don't say, oh, okay, mom, sounds good. They usually react with intense aggression. They accuse the parents of horrible things. You're destroying my life, or you've ruined my trust.
It is vital to understand the psychology behind that escalation. Those reactions are not just random, uncontrolled anger. They are strategic.
Wait, strategic, like they're planning it.
Whether conscious or unconscious, yes. The child is testing the parent's new determination. By hurling an emotional accusation like a 14-year-old girl screaming, "You've turned me into a laughingstock," because her mother called her friends to find her, the child is trying to shake the parent's legitimacy.
Ah, I see. They are looking for a crack in the armor.
Exactly. They want to see if this new calm anchor persona is real or if it's just a phase they can break.
The child is essentially asking, are you truly determined? Or can I still distract you?
Yes. And usually, the very readiness of a parent to engage in a discussion over these accusations signals to the child that the parent isn't fully determined.
So if my kid screams, you don't trust me, you're ruining my life, and I instinctively reply, I didn't ruin your life, I just want you to be safe, and you broke my trust first, I've already lost.
You've completely lost.
Wow.
Because you have entered a negotiation over your right to parent. You are defending yourself. You have allowed the child to change the subject from their dangerous behavior to your alleged flaws as a parent.
That's insidious.
It is. The child learns that by aggravating the conflict, by making you defend yourself, they can successfully neutralize your disturbing presence.
They've successfully distracted you from the fact that they skipped school or came home drunk.
Yes. And there is a much deeper, far more poignant layer to this resistance, actually. The literature points to a 2014 study by Padilla, Walker, Nelson, and Knapp. It completely reframes how we view adolescent rebellion.
This study completely shifted my perspective, because the standard narrative, the one we all just accept, is that teenagers who seek out forbidden thrills, who rebel aggressively, want total independence.
Right. We assume they just want to be left alone.
We assume they want their parents entirely out of their lives.
That is the surface presentation, but the research reveals that these same children who are highly drawn to risky behavior simultaneously possess a profound, deep-seated need for security.
It's a paradox. They want to jump out of the airplane, but they're desperately looking back to make sure someone packed the parachute.
That is exactly the dynamic. While the child might consciously and loudly strive for autonomy, subconsciously, they are intensely aware of their own vulnerability. They have a profound need for an accompanying presence to protect them from real danger.
So when they push you away, they are actually testing to see if you are strong enough to withstand being pushed.
Yes. They want to know that you won't give up on them, even when they are completely unlovable.
Wow. That changes everything.
Parents who maintain their presence without escalating into violence or retreating into silence actually answer those deep-seated needs. The steady anchor provides the exact security the thrill-seeking child is secretly desperate for.
Okay, so this all makes beautiful sense in theory. We understand the biology of the trap, the psychology of the symptom trance, and the deep emotional needs driving the rebellion. But let's bring this down to the messy, high-stakes reality of, like, a Tuesday night in the kitchen.
Right, the real-world application.
Yeah. When your kid is screaming venom in your face, calling you terrible names, How do you actually maintain this monk-level composure? What is the practical tool for not losing your mind?
The framework provides a very literal, highly practical tool for this exact crucible. It's called the mantra of vigilant care.
A mantra, like a meditation.
Basically, yes. And the training courses developed from this approach, parents are literally given a printed text, almost like a diploma, at the end of their sessions. It is a meditation designed to be internalized so deeply that it acts as psychological armor.
And the goal, as the authors beautifully state, is for this mantra to pass from the parents' hearts into the heart of the child. Let's break down the architecture of this mantra because it is essentially a cognitive behavioral hack to override the fight-or-flight response.
It dismantles the specific emotional triggers that cause us to lose control. The first crucial line of the mantra is this: I don't have to convince my child that my attitude is justified. I only have to tell myself, I cannot give up on my child.
I don't have to convince my child. That single sentence is a massive relief valve. It frees you from the most exhausting trap of all, the debate trap.
Yes, the debate trap is brutal.
Because when your teenager says, it's not fair all my friends stay out until 2 a.m., you're the only crazy parent, your instinct is to pull out statistics or argue about family values or defend the logic of your curfew.
And the moment you do that, you have elevated the child to a peer in a negotiation. You are seeking their intellectual approval for your parenting.
You're trying to win a debate with a 15-year-old.
Exactly. This mantra firmly reminds the parent, you do not need their consent to protect them. Your vigilance is dictated by your duty and by warning signs, not by their agreement.
Then there's this incredible imagery in the next section of the mantra. It says, if I maintain my self-control when provoked, I am a strong and caring parent. If I get carried away, I cease to be an anchor for my child and instead become her ping-pong ball.
The ping-pong ball versus the anchor, it is the perfect visual representation of the dynamic.
Think about the physics of an anchor on a ship, right? An anchor doesn't fight the ocean currents. It doesn't scream at the storm. Its entire power and utility lie in its unmovable, silent heavyweight.
Right, it just sits there.
Exactly. If an anchor tried to, quote-unquote, fight the storm by thrashing around in the water, it would just get uprooted and dragged away by the tide.
Yeah.
A ping-pong ball, on the other hand, has no weight. It just bounces wildly at high speed wherever the paddle smacks it.
So when a child throws a furious accusation like, you are ruining my life, that is the ping pong paddle swinging.
Right.
If you scream back, I give you everything, you ungrateful brat, you are the ball flying frantically across the table. You are being controlled entirely by their swing. But if you maintain silence or simply repeat your original statement of intent, you remain the heavy iron anchor.
The storm is raging, the water is churning all around you, but you are physically and emotionally unmovable. And what I love about this mantra is that it doesn't demand, robotic perfection. It builds in immense grace for the parent. There's a line that says, if I make mistakes, tomorrow is a new day. I can rebuild my commitment and develop better self-control.
Which is so important because no one is perfect.
You are going to lose your temper eventually.
You are. Vigilant care is a persistent stance over a long period of time, not an expectation of flawless execution in every single millisecond. And the literature heavily stresses that this mantra relies on timely preparation. You do not just try to remember these words while you are actively being screamed at.
Because your prefrontal cortex is offline by that point. You can't think logically.
Exactly. Parents are instructed to rehearse this text in moments of calm. They must visualize the confrontation in advance.
Like mental reps for an athlete.
Yes. If you know you're going to search your teenager's room for drugs, you know they are going to explode, you visualize their anger, you anticipate the specific cruel things they will say, and you prepare your calm, anchored response beforehand.
And doing that preparation diminishes the neurological threat response.
It does. It reduces the actual risk of the parent reacting in a way that causes further damage.
But the mantra ends with a realization that requires a complete paradigm shift for most families. The final line of the diploma is, I cannot act alone. I must widen my base by including relatives, friends, teachers, and parents of my child's friends. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but rather serves to broaden my shoulders as a parent.
This is a monumental pivot. We are moving from individual internal psychological tactics to external, environmental, and systemic interventions.
Right.
When the storm is simply too strong, one anchor is not enough to hold the ship. You need a network of cables. You need the village.
And this is where the approach gets incredibly radical. Because what is the absolute universal instinct of a parent when their child is in serious trouble? Say they're failing out of school, stealing, or experimenting with hard drugs.
The instinct is absolute, suffocating secrecy. Parents isolate themselves completely. They reduce their list of confidants to zero.
Why? Why do we hide the very thing we desperately need help with?
Because the stigma is immense. Parents feel profound shame. They internalize the child's behavior as a direct public reflection of their own moral failure as caregivers.
They think, if people know my son is stealing, they will think I am a terrible person.
Exactly. Furthermore, they rationalize the isolation by assuming everyone else is too busy with their own perfect lives to be burdened by their mess. They become entirely consumed by the secret.
But maintaining that secret is fatal to the concept of vigilant care, isn't it?
It is entirely fatal. To effectively manage a highly resistant, volatile child, you have to break the isolation. You have to recruit supporters.
The text outlines exactly who should be considered for this network. It starts with family grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings. But it must expand outward. Friends from work, neighbors, teachers, sports coaches, community figures.
And even, which is often the most surprising part to people, the child's own friends or the parents of those friends.
Which I found completely shocking at first.
It seems counterintuitive, but the inclusion of the child's peers and their parents becomes a critical lifeline later on, particularly in extreme scenarios. But the first monumental hurdle is simply learning how to ask for help.
Right. How do you actually initiate that conversation? Hey, nice to see you. My daughter's doing drugs. Want to grab a coffee?
Yeah, it's not exactly small talk.
No. Thankfully, there are very specific, plain-spoken scripts provided for breaking this ice. The advice is to approach a potential supporter and be bracingly honest. You say something like, lately I've become more and more worried about my daughter. I'm afraid she's hiding things from me and is getting into real trouble. Can we meet and talk about that?
Or another script. In the last few months, my wife and I have realized that our son has made some very dangerous friendships. He's evasive. When we ask where he's going, he slams the door. We are terrified and we don't know what to do.
It is raw vulnerability. It is. And the data from the author's extensive program reveals something beautiful about human nature. You would assume people would judge you or awkwardly back away. But parents who dare to break out of their isolation found the vast majority of people reacted with immediate empathy and support.
Candid vulnerability inspires connection. The text notes that almost every parent, upon hearing such a desperate request, will privately think, this could so easily happen to me.
Right. Because everyone is struggling with something.
Exactly. Many will openly admit, I have similar concerns about my own kid. I'd be relieved to talk to you.
It shatters the toxic illusion that everyone else's family is flawless.
Okay, so you have gathered your village, you've sat down, explained your fears, and admitted you feel too weak to handle this alone. What do these supporters actually do? How do they intervene without just screaming at the kid themselves?
This brings us to the home visit strategy, and the mechanics of this are fascinating. It sounds almost like psychological theater.
It really does. It is a deeply symbolic, highly structured intervention designed to alter the child's perception of their environment. The parents ask a supporter to come and visit the family home. But the critical twist is this. The visit ideally takes place when the child is completely absent.
Which immediately sounds counterproductive. Why have an intervention when the kid isn't even in the building?
Because the goal isn't a confrontation. The goal is leaving a trace. The supporter enters the child's space and leaves a physical artifact.
Like what?
A short, positive, handwritten message. A symbolic gift. Perhaps a photograph reminding the child of a shared happy event from the past. Before this happens, the parents calmly inform the child, our friends are going to start visiting the house because we've asked them to help us cope with this difficult time.
The phrase used to describe the effect of this is so poignant. The text states these symbolic visits waken the child's dormant sense of belonging.
Dormant sense of belonging, yes.
It suggests that even the most defiant, isolated teenager still possesses a deep desire to be part of a community. But that desire has gone to sleep. The note on the pillow is a physical manifestation that the community has not forgotten them.
However, we must be realistic about the immediate reaction. The child will rarely return home, find the note, and weep with gratitude.
Yeah, I have to stop you there. Because if I put myself in the mind of a 15-year-old and I find out my parents secretly brought their coworkers or my uncle into my bedroom to leave me little notes about my behavior while I was out,
You'd be furious.
I am not feeling a dormant sense of belonging. I'm feeling completely, utterly violated. I am furious. I'd burn the notes. I'd accuse them of betrayal.
You would scream about your privacy being invaded. You would yell that they have no right to talk to strangers about your life.
Exactly.
There's the precisely designed, anticipated response. The framework fully anticipates this fury because the anger over privacy is a defense mechanism.
Wait, it's a smokescreen?
Yes, it is a smokescreen. The child is attempting to drag you into a philosophical debate about boundaries to distract you from the core issue, which is their dangerous behavior.
So how does a parent not get sucked into defending themselves? My instinct would be to shout back, well, you lost your right to privacy when you started stealing money from my purse.
And the moment you say that, you are back in the symptom trance.
Oh, right. Playing ping pong.
Exactly. You were playing ping pong. You were debating the terms of their punishment. To maintain the anchor, the parents must prepare for this specific blow-up. When the child screams about privacy, the parents do not apologize. They do not get defensive. They do not engage in a debate about who violated whose trust first.
What do they say?
They calmly state, "We feel that we're going through a difficult period and decided to get all the help we can get."
Wow. It's a bulletproof response.
It completely neutralizes the attack.
It is unarguable. The parents have demonstrated, through physical action, that they are no longer intimidated by the child's demand for secrecy. The home visits lend immense, tangible weight to the parent's position.
Yes. Their authority is suddenly amplified and validated by the outside world. The child realizes the secret bunker has been dismantled.
And building this network isn't just a nice community-building exercise. As we delve deeper into the reality of severe resistance, we see that this network becomes a literal lifeline. Because when a child realizes their standard provocations and guilt trips are no longer lifting the parent's anchor, they will often escalate to the ultimate weapons in their arsenal.
Extreme threats.
Yes. When the old tricks fail, the child pulls out the heavy artillery to force the parents back into submission. And the most common, universally terrifying threat is running away.
The visceral horror this threat causes for a parent is completely paralyzing.
The images that immediately flood a parent's mind are the stuff of nightmares. Their child wandering dark, dangerous streets alone, falling into drug addiction, freezing in the cold, or being targeted by human trafficking.
This profound terror is often mixed with toxic levels of guilt. The parents agonize, what did we do wrong to make them hate us this much? How did we push them to this?
And that cocktail of fear and guilt creates absolute paralysis.
Yes. The threat of total disconnection prevents the parents from exercising any vigilant care at all. They convince themselves, if I enforce this curfew, if I search his room, he'll run away and he might end up dead. Therefore, I must do nothing.
But the research argues that passivity in the face of this threat is the absolute worst outcome. By doing nothing, the parents are essentially proving to the child that they really have given up.
The text uses an incredibly evocative metaphor for this. The parent's helplessness is like a rupture of the anchor's cable, precisely at the moment when the currents are about to carry the ship away.
So the ship is just gone.
Exactly. To counteract this paralysis, the parents must lean the entirety of their weight on their support network. We have 3 incredibly detailed case studies from the source material that illustrate exactly how a network responds to a runaway, and crucially, what happens when a parent tries to act alone.
Let's examine the first case, the case of Myra.
Myra is 17 years old. The background here is a drastic, terrifying decline. She suffers a massive scholastic drop. She stops attending classes, only showing up to school grounds to hang out with a new group of highly problematic friends.
Flags everywhere.
Then she starts sleeping out all night without notifying her parents, Guy and Liza. She comes home with a tongue piercing, refuses to speak to them, and basically shuts herself in her room or vanishes entirely.
Guy and Liza are living in a state of sheer terror. They are walking on eggshells in their own home, completely paralyzed by the fear that if they say a single wrong word, Myra will disappear forever.
So they go to counseling and learn the vigilant care approach. The counselors help them realize that their terrified silence is actually conveying a message of despair and abandonment to Myra.
So they realize they have to build a network.
Yeah.
And here's the fascinating tactical move. They decide to get in touch with a couple of Myra's new, quote-unquote, bad friends and the parents of those friends.
Which feels incredibly risky to most parents. We assume the parents of the bad influence kids will be hostile and defensive.
Right. Like, don't blame my kid for your kid's problem.
Exactly. But the literature notes this assumption is frequently mistaken. Even a parent whose own child is struggling may respond positively if approached respectfully, because deep down, they harbor the exact same terrors for their own child.
Wow.
So Guy and Liza build this network, prepare their mindset, and then Myra vanishes again.
But this time, the reaction changes. Instead of sitting by the phone, crying in helpless panic, they mobilize. They contact her friends. They locate exactly which house she is staying at.
Huh.
And they physically drive to the house together.
They arrive at the house. Myra is asked to come down to the living room. She is completely shocked to see them there.
Because they'd never done that before.
Never. Her father, Guy, tells her calmly, without raising his voice, that they want to take her home. Myra is stunned into silence. Her mother, Liza, adds that they are there because they love her, they will not give up on her, and they're asking her to come home.
And here is the linchpin of the entire intervention. The friend's mother, the parent of the bad influence, backs up Guy and Liza. She looks at Myra and says she is welcome to come back and visit the next day, but right now, she has to go home with her parents.
The united front is undeniable. Myra reluctantly agrees. Over the following days, supporters from that newly formed network make coordinated visits to the house. 2 of them succeed in having genuine conversations with Myra.
And it slowly shifts the dynamic.
Yes. Gradually, the temperature in the house lowers. She starts participating in family meals again. She holds down a job for 2 months. She eventually joins a special program for teens in danger of dropping out.
It is not a magical overnight fairy tale ending, but the cycle of despair and running away is broken.
It worked because it shattered the script Myra had written in her head. She assumed, my parents are too weak and scared to come after me. When they actually showed up, calmly, without screaming, and with community backup, it completely rewrote her reality.
Which leads us to the second case study. I was so eager to talk about this one, the story of Irving.
Irving is also 17. His behavior has escalated dangerously. He has come home under the influence of alcohol and drugs multiple times. The breaking point occurs when his parents, Arthur and Sylvia, catch him actively stealing his mother's jewelry.
This confrontation acts as the catalyst, and Irving runs away from home. But because Arthur and Sylvia had been trained in vigilant care, they had mentally rehearsed for this exact nightmare scenario. They had a plan.
They immediately got in touch with Irving's friends. They informed them they were prepared to involve the police. However, the friends warned the parents that Irving was highly volatile, and that police involvement would likely cause him to react extremely dangerously.
So they pivot.
Yes. The parents make a critical, tactical decision. They delay alerting the police and instead utilize their network to widen the search themselves.
They contact older kids who used to be friends with Irving in the past. This makeshift network of scouts fans out, and they finally locate the specific apartment where Irving is crashing. Arthur, the father, drives to the location.
But crucially, he does not go alone.
Right. He brings his brother.
He uses the network. They enter the apartment and find Irving passed out on a filthy mattress, surrounded by cigarette stubs, empty beer cans, and vodka bottles.
Arthur approaches the mattress and shakes his son awake from a deep, intoxicated sleep. The interaction that follows is phenomenal. Irving opens his eyes, looks up at his father and uncle in total disbelief, and asks, "How did you find me?"
And Arthur responds with a sentence that should be framed on every parent's wall. He looks at his son and says calmly, "We'll always find you because we won't stop looking for you."
Wow. We won't stop looking for you.
The psychological impact of that statement is staggering. Irving, utterly disarmed, agrees to go home. In the days that follow, people from the network visit him at the house, including those older friends who helped find him.
And your response to that?
Incredibly well. He begins talking nostalgically about the past and starts showing a genuine desire to return to a normal trajectory.
The psychological analysis of why this intervention was so wildly successful is fascinating. The authors refer to it as the Tom Sawyer effect. Unpack that for us, because it explains the emotional mechanism of why being hunted down feels like love.
The text points out that Irving's relief and subsequent behavioral shift wasn't just about the physical reality of being found and brought home. It was the effort of the search itself.
The effort, yes.
The immense hardships his parents went through to locate him, the fact that they mobilized an entire community, the persistence required to track him down, these were undeniable, concrete proofs of profound love and devotion.
It physically proves they care, in a way words never could.
Exactly. It forcefully counteracts the intense, crushing sense of abandonment that young people in these spirals experience. They often feel entirely unlovable and assume everyone has given up on them.
And the Tom Sawyer reference.
Right. The authors reference Mark Twain's classic novel, the episode where Tom Sawyer and his friends run away to an island. Tom secretly sneaks back to the mainland just to watch, with deep fascination and emotional satisfaction, as the entire village frantically searches the river for his body.
He wants to see if he matters. He wants to know if his absence leaves a hole.
Yes. The psychological experience of being looked for by a community is deeply, profoundly meaningful. It becomes a treasured proof of worth in the child's heart, even if their pride won't allow them to acknowledge it openly for years.
It's beautiful. But the research is also brutally realistic. It provides a stark cautionary tale to contrast with Arthur and Irving's success. It shows exactly what happens when you attempt to find a runaway without vigilant care, using only anger and a show of force.
The case of Carlos and his father, Mario.
Yes. Tell us
Yeah.
about Carlos.
Carlos is 13 years old. Mario, operating under the old paradigm of strict control, told Carlos he would punish him severely if he broke curfew. Mario was highly anxious because Carlos was hanging out with older, delinquent teenagers suspected of stealing motorcycles.
So what does a rebellious 13-year-old do with a strict ultimatum? He locks his bedroom door, climbs out the window, and stays out all night, completely defying the prohibition.
Mario realizes Carlos is gone and goes out looking for him in a state of absolute fury. He spots Carlos standing on a street corner with his delinquent friends. But Mario's approach is the exact opposite of Arthur's. Mario does not bring a supporter to anchor him.
He's flying solo.
He is alone and fueled by rage. He stops his car, storms up to his son, and peremptorily orders him to get in the car immediately.
And naturally, Carlos refuses. He is surrounded by his tough older friends. He cannot afford to lose face by submitting to his screaming father, so he plants his feet and says no.
When Carlos refuses, Mario's illusion of control shatters, and he completely loses his self-control. He resorts to physical force. He violently twists his 13-year-old son's arm behind his back and forcefully shoves him into the car.
A complete explosion of the ping pong ball. And what happens? Before Mario can even get behind the wheel and drive away, Carlos scrambles out the opposite window and disappears into the night.
Mario, now desperate, calls the police. But when the police finally locate Carlos, Carlos immediately informs the officers that his father physically assaulted him in front of witnesses.
Wow.
And because there were witnesses, Mario is taken into custody. Legal proceedings are formally opened against the father for child abuse.
The outcome is absolutely devastating.
The text notes that from that moment forward, Mario felt his hands were permanently tied. He had absolutely no doubt that if he ever tried to cross Carlos or assert authority again, Carlos would not hesitate to get him into deeper legal trouble. Mario's parental authority was not just damaged, it was irrevocably destroyed.
It is the ultimate proof of the danger of escalation. Arthur acted as an anchor, utilizing his network to prove his love. Mario acted as a solo explosive force trying to prove his dominance. Arthur saved his son. Mario lost his entirely.
A very tragic but clear contrast.
And as dark as the threat of running away is, we must now transition to a threat that is even more terrifying. A threat that paralyzes parents so absolutely that it requires the most delicate, counterintuitive application of vigilant care possible.
We are talking about the ultimate horror scenario for any family: suicide threats.
Right.
The fear of suicide is described in the psychological literature as an act of absolute finality. A runaway can be found, stolen money can be earned back, a drug addiction can be treated, but suicide is permanent.
Yes.
This underlying fear haunts the minds of parents even when a highly resistant child has never explicitly made a threat. But when a child does openly threaten self-harm, the parents are plunged into constant suffocating dread.
And the research gives a very strong, entirely unambiguous directive here, which is, under no circumstances whatsoever should parents keep a suicide threat a secret.
This is perhaps the most critical insight in the entire approach. To understand why secrecy is so dangerous, we have to examine a concept the text calls the suicidal ecology.
The suicidal ecology. Let's dig into the mechanics of that. How does an ecology of suicide form in a house?
When parents live in terror of suicide, their instinct is to agree to whatever the child demands, simply to keep them breathing. The child says, "Leave me alone, stop asking about school, or I'll kill myself."
So the parents retreat.
They retreat. They drop all academic demands. They allow the child to completely isolate themselves in their room, to drop their friends, to stop participating in life. The parents and the child retreat into what the text describes as a hermetically sealed, enclosed parent-child environment.
It's like they build a secret dark bunker inside the house and no one from the outside world is allowed in.
Exactly. But the tragic paradox is that this isolation, intended to protect the child, actually feeds the suicidal ideation.
Because it validates it.
Yes. The text warns urgently about the extreme danger of passivity here. When the structural framework that maintains a child's basic functioning is dismantled, when they no longer have to cope with school, when they lose their social ties, when they have no responsibilities, their anxiety, their depression, and their sense of utter despair skyrocket.
So by giving in to the threat, by demanding nothing of the kid in order to save them, the parents are inadvertently hollowing out the kid's life, making it empty and meaningless, which mathematically increases the actual risk of suicide.
Precisely. The suicidal tendency is nourished by the continuous, secretive interaction with the paralyzed, terrified parents. This closed loop is the suicidal ecology. The suicidal thoughts are validated and strengthened by the parents' obvious terror and submission.
So how do you dismantle this ecology? Because obviously a parent can't just ignore a suicide threat, march into the room, and demand they do their math homework. How do you break the loop safely?
You dismantle it by shattering the secret. The literature states that this suicidal ecology is altered completely the moment the environment expands to include not just the paralyzed parents, but outside supporters. The text provides a very specific, actionable protocol for this.
And the protocol is intense.
Yeah.
It dictates that each and every time the child alludes to the possibility of suicide, even in passing, the parents must immediately call at least one of their supporters. And they must do this demonstratively, right out in the open.
Yes. They pick up the phone and call the supporter while standing in the child's presence, or they ask the supporter to come over to the house immediately.
I have to imagine that feels incredibly dangerous to a parent in that moment.
Mhm.
If my child threatens suicide and I pick up on my phone and call their uncle while making eye contact with them, aren't they going to feel massively betrayed? Aren't they going to escalate and perhaps carry out the threat in retaliation?
That specific fear is exactly what keeps the secret bunker locked. Parents are terrified of retaliation, but the clinical data reveals a deeply comforting truth. In the vast majority of cases, the child ends up accepting the external help. The psychological reality is that the precipice of suicide is not only alluring to a deeply depressed child, it is also profoundly terrifying to them.
They're scared of themselves.
Yes. As they approach that edge, their internal readiness to grasp at hands stretched out to them actually grows, even if they outward project anger.
Calling the supporter breaks the hypnotic trance of the bunker. It shifts the dynamic entirely. It forces fresh air into the room. Let's look at the final case study from the text, the story of Bob, because it perfectly illustrates how breaking the suicidal ecology actually works in practice.
Bob is 18 years old. His crisis was triggered by a massive athletic failure. He had trained obsessively for over a year for a specific competition, failed completely, and subsequently plummeted into a severe depression. He took the wildly expensive athletic shoes his parents had bought him and threw them in the garbage.
He started projecting all of his internal self-hatred outward, blaming his parents for his failure. He accused them of being blind to his suffering, of pressuring him, and he began making dark innuendos about not caring to go on living.
Those vague innuendos rapidly escalated into explicit, open threats, accompanied by terrifying orgies of blame. He would burst into his parents' bedroom in the middle of the night, screaming horribly, hurling objects against the walls.
Imagine the sheer terror those parents lived in every single night.
They were utterly paralyzed. Bob started leaving the house for long, unexplained hours at night. The parents desperately tried to arrange a psychiatrist for him, but he adamantly refused to go. Finally, desperate and exhausted, they sought counseling and learned they had to build a support group.
So they recruited their village.
They reached out to relatives, close friends, and crucially, Bob's sports coach.
Initially, there was a temporary period of calm when Bob's uncle invited him to stay at his house for a few days. But the moment the mother came to visit him at the uncle's house, the suicidal ecology reactivated.
Immediately, Bob locked himself in the uncle's bathroom, renewed his terrifying threats, refused to unlock the door, and eventually fled the house without saying where he was going.
That incident made it crystal clear to the network that whenever the parents were physically present, the threats and the performance of despair resurfaced. The closed loop of the suicidal ecology was still intact, even in a different location.
So, the network made a highly strategic, incredibly difficult decision. For the upcoming weeks, all direct communication with Bob would be maintained exclusively by the supporters. The parents would step back entirely.
They completely removed the parents from the ping pong game. They took away the paddle, and Bob was furious. He was incredibly angry that his darkest secret had been exposed to his uncle and his coach.
He lashed out, telling his supporters they were useless and couldn't help him. But, and this is the turning point that proves the theory, despite his anger, he agreed to allow a few of them to visit him. He didn't lock them out.
On the third night of this new arrangement, Bob was in a state of intense, agitated restlessness. His uncle and his sports coach came over, and they succeeded in convincing him to leave the house and go out with them for a long walk. They stayed by his side, walking through the dark through the entire night.
The clinical notes on this event emphasize that the quiet, persistent companionship Bob experienced during that long night walk created a profound new bond between him, his uncle, and his coach.
They didn't interrogate him, did they?
No, they didn't demand he snap out of it. They just walked with him. In the days that followed, their exchanges shifted into much more positive, stable tones.
His emotional landscape was still fragile, obviously. He wasn't instantly cured of depression. But the suicidal messages completely ended. The ecology was broken. He eventually felt stable enough to renew direct contact with his parents, and a month later, he agreed to join a community program that combined academic help with sports.
If we pull back and look at the entire arc of our deep dive today, stretching all the way back to the concept of the symptom trance, we see the ultimate resolution in Bob's story.
Yes, the threads all connect here.
By opening the doors, by enduring the shame and letting the village into the bunker, the parents broke the trance for themselves, and they broke it for Bob. They stopped trying to forcefully control Bob's despair directly, which was completely failing, and instead controlled their own environment by bringing in accountability, presence, and fresh air.
They anchored their family not just to their own frail strength, but to the collective weight of their community.
Exactly.
It is a massive, life-altering paradigm shift. And it brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked for the listener, because we have traversed some incredibly dense, emotionally heavy psychological ground today.
The central thesis we must walk away with is a complete reversal of our biological and emotional instincts. When we are faced with resistance, whether it's a teenager rolling their eyes, a partner stonewalling us, or a child threatening to run away, our primal instinct is immediate escalation.
Because we want control.
We crave an immediate show of force to regain a sense of safety and control. We want to snap our fingers, yell loudly, and make the defiance stop immediately.
But as we've seen, that expectation of immediate change is a dangerous illusion. It leads directly to the trap of escalation. It leads to habituation, where your family gets used to screaming. It leads to buying quiet and living in separate hostile worlds.
And it sucks you into the symptom trance, where you are hypnotized and paralyzed by the very behavior you were desperately trying to stop.
True authority, the kind of enduring strength defined by Omer and Everett, does not come from volume, threats, or physical dominance. It comes from persistent, vigilant care.
It comes from a stance of radical self-control. It's the ability to calmly state your presence and your duty without demanding immediate submission from the other person.
It is becoming the anchor. You state your unshakable position, I will check your room, I will not accept violence, I will always look for you, and then you refuse to let their ensuing anger turn you into a bouncing ping pong ball.
And perhaps most importantly, it requires the profound humility and bravery to realize that you cannot act alone. You must shatter your own isolation and ask your community for help.
And while our focus today has been primarily on the parent-child dynamic, it is vital to recognize how broadly these principles apply.
Oh, universally. The mechanics of refusing to be drawn into pointless, escalating arguments, the mental discipline of stepping out of an obsessive symptom trance, and the power of maintaining a steady, calm, unshakable presence. These are incredibly potent tools for navigating a hostile workplace, managing an estranged sibling, or de-escalating a conflict with a difficult partner.
It ultimately boils down to recognizing exactly where your illusion of control ends and where your true anchoring presence begins.
Very well said.
It is profound. And it leaves us with our final thought for today. I want to talk directly to you, the listener, wherever you are right now. Think about a specific conflict in your own life that is currently causing you distress.
It might not be a rebellious teenager.
Right. It might be a passive-aggressive colleague, a friend who constantly crosses your boundaries, or a family member you dread seeing. Think about how you feel when you are stuck in that symptom trance with them. Think about how you obsess over their behavior, how furious you get that they won't change, and how exhausted you feel getting dragged into the exact same predictable arguments over and over again.
Think about how many times you've let them swing the paddle while you play the ping pong ball.
Exactly. Now, what would happen if, starting tomorrow morning, you completely stop trying to force them to change? What if you totally relinquished the illusion that you can control them? And instead, what if you focused every ounce of your energy entirely on controlling yourself?
What would happen if you decided to become an unmovable, calm, heavy anchor?
How would that quiet, radical shift change the dynamic of the storm raging around you?
It is a question that requires a tremendous amount of courage and self-reflection to answer.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly profound deep dive. We deeply appreciate your curiosity, your commitment to understanding the hidden mechanics of human connection, and your willingness to sit in the murky, complex parts of life with us. Keep questioning your instincts, keep learning, and keep anchoring yourselves.